Everyone in New York and in Monrovia. Can I first start by expressing my deep condolences to the people of Ghana for the loss of the former President Jerry Rawlings, and to the people of Mali for the loss of the former President Amadou Toumani Touré. And with that, I'd like to welcome you all very much to this meeting of the PBC's Liberia configuration. Let me extend a special tribute to our friends in Monrovia who are joining us today, including our former colleague and very good friend and now distinguished Minister for Foreign Affairs, D. Maxwell Kamaya. I also like to welcome SRSG Chambas Resident Coordinator Kingsley Amaning, the chair of the National Election Commission of Liberia, Davidetta Brown Lansana, as well as Oscar Blow, former from the Election Coordinating Committee. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of our partners from ECOWAS, and of course, Assistant Secretary General for Peacebuilding Support, Oscar Fernandez Taranco. Lastly, I'd like to warmly welcome Israel Davis, Chargé d'Affaires at the Mission of Liberia here in New York. Before giving the floor to our distinguished speakers, I would like to outline the objective of this meeting. As you all are aware of, during the past 6 months, the configuration has been supporting Liberia by focusing on the socio-economic impact of the COVID-19. In April, we had a first discussion where several ministers attended, as well as the national coordinator for the COVID-19 response. Following that discussion, and because of the COVID-19 pandemic, I undertook a virtual visit to Liberia, meeting with government and civil society. I've also had discussions with the IMF and the World Bank, focusing on their assistance during the pandemic. One key message coming out of my discussion with civil society organizations in June was their appeal to the international community to keep attention on the upcoming elections, ensuring that they are conducted in a free, fair, and transparent manner. The focus of the meeting today is thus on the upcoming elections, as well as on the related question of women's participation and empowerment in Liberia. The upcoming senatorial election and referendum were postponed due to COVID-19 and are now scheduled to take place on 8th December. The PBC Liberia configuration has followed preparations closely ahead of the elections in the past, as the elections will serve as an important test, peace building and sustaining peace in Liberia. The situation related to elections in the sub-region is also significant for the development in Liberia. And we have seen how tensions in, for example, Cote d'Ivoire have had spillover effect in the country. Liberia has a strong history of women's participation and leadership when it comes to peace building. And we especially look forward to hearing from about the ongoing preparations with a gender perspective in mind, including relating to efforts to ensure women's full, effective, and meaningful participation in these elections. There have been alarming reports of increased sexual and gender-based violence in Liberia during the month of lockdown. The government should be commended for their efforts in responding to this, including declaring a national emergency around this issue and allocating resources for a task force that will put together a roadmap for addressing sexual and gender-based violence in a systematic manner. At the same time, it is important to ensure that this work continues and that concrete measures are put in place. As chair of the PBC Liberia configuration, we fully support these efforts. The importance of civil society during an election period cannot be overstated. And we are very pleased to have a representative from the Observer Network Election Coordinating Committee to brief us on their important work. We're also pleased to have an update on the regional implications of elections in the sub-region. Further, ECOWAS is playing a crucial role in these processes, and we are therefore happy to have ECOWAS with us today. Before giving the floor to our briefers, I have a few notes on the technical aspect of this virtual meeting. A speakers list is now open in the Zoom chat room. Please indicate there if you would like to take the floor. We will then proceed with the speaking order according to protocol, as is a standard PBC practice. With these introductory remarks, I would now like to hand over the floor to our distinguished briefers. First, I'm very happy to give the floor to someone who's very well known in New York, and our former colleague, now Minister for Foreign Affairs of Liberia, His Excellency D. Maxwell Kemaya. Foreign Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, Madam Chair, my dear friend and sister, the Ambassador of Sweden to the UN, Ambassador Anna Karen Edstrom, and Chair of Liberia Configuration of the UN Peace Building Commission, for convening this meeting. We also recognize Dr. Chambers, the ROC, and all of my colleagues in New York who are a part of this meeting today. I feel like it's a reunion for me, that we can reconnect. And so thank you very much. Let me move in further. On behalf of our government, the President and the government and people of Liberia extend our profoundest condolences to the governments and peoples of Ghana and Mali on the unfortunate passing of the two former presidents. May their souls and the souls of all other faithful departed rest in perfect peace. Again, as we said thanks for convening this meeting, working in collaboration with the Peace Building Support Office. And this meeting has been convened at a critical time for Liberia. December 8, 2020, the midterm senatorial elections will be held in our country. Being fully cognizant of the importance of elections to sustainability of peace, security, and democracy, the government of the Republic of Liberia continues to make great strides to ensure that this midterm senatorial electoral process, like those in recent past, is held in a free, fair, transparent, and peaceful manner, by continuing to urge all the stakeholders, including all political actors, to exhibit deportments that show respect for the rule of law in order to enhance the continued peace and stability Liberians and those residing within our borders enjoy. Additionally, under the astute leadership of His Excellency President Weah, the government has allotted approximately $6 million United States towards the budget for the ensuing elections, which is in the neighborhood of $13,500,000 United States. Also, on behalf of our government and the President, we extend our thanks and appreciation to the United Nations, in particular the UNDP for its Electoral Assistance Project and the ECOWAS Commission for the needed technical support to the institutional capacity development of the National Elections Commission and cleaning of the voter register. We are also pleased to note that His Excellency President Weah, along with his government, is keen on advancing the participation of women, youth, and marginalized groups in the electoral process. We appreciate the support to the development of sustainable platforms to increase the participation of women in the national legislature, to combat misinformation and safeguard against electoral violence, including violence against women in elections. We are expressly pleased with the level of work done by the National Elections Commission in addressing some of its many challenges. Barely a week ago, we learned of the conclusion on the voter roll update and exhibition exercises. In a short while, we will hear from the chair of the Election Commission regarding details on the electoral processes, including progress and challenges. Despite the successes attained in preparing for the elections, it is certain that additional resources are critically needed to aid the process and ensure the holding of successful, free, fair, and transparent elections. Hence, this occasion allows us the opportunity to join others, including our government, to kindly request the international community and friends to see Liberia through this process. Excellencies, as we battle COVID-19 and endeavor to address the economic challenges, a lot remains at stake, thus claiming the urgent attention of His Excellency President Weah and his government, hence prompting His Excellency's decisive actions. We continue to keep track of the socio-economic, political tensions in the West African sub-region. Secondly, regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, working with our partners, including but not limited to the United Nations, we have apparently been spared of some of its most dreadful effects. We have been able to improve, drawing on past experience 6 years ago with the Ebola pandemic, the Ebola epidemic, and together with development partners, we have mounted a robust national response that seems to have contained considerably the COVID-19 pandemic. To date, Liberia has recorded approximately 1,462 cases, 9 new, of which 1,311 individuals have recovered and 82 deaths, with 68 active cases. This is as of November 11, 2020. With this, we extend our profound gratitude to our bilateral and multilateral partners for the invaluable support Liberia has been receiving to deal with the COVID-19 emergency and help sustain the Liberian economy. With the vital assistance also, we have been able to develop a post-COVID-19 economic recovery plan that prioritizes short-term actions and investments in key sectors such as agriculture and tourism as a means of mitigating the impact of COVID-19, while also providing the basis for economic recovery. The social political situation in the West African sub-region calls for urgent attention and concerted efforts. The Liberia Refugee Repatriation and Resettlement Commission, LRRC, has reported the arrival of over 600 new refugees from Cote d'Ivoire, which necessitated activation of the humanitarian contingency plan developed by joint stakeholders that includes the government of Liberia and UN agencies in November 2019. We call on our friendly government and development partners to kindly assist with logistical and financial support to address the emerging humanitarian emergency and cross-border cooperation with Cote d'Ivoire and the Republic of Guinea, respectively. In his response to rape and other forms of gender-based violence, His Excellency President Weah declared a national emergency on rape, appointed a special prosecutor for rape, set up a national sex offender registry, established a national security task force on sexual and gender-based violence, and allotted an initial $2 million United States for the rolling out of the roadmap that has been developed to fight rape and all forms of sexual and gender-based violence. Previously, in July 2020, following consultations with the national legislature, the domestic violence bill was passed unanimously. The new law protects the vulnerable and specifies punitive measures for those who perpetrate violence against them. Regarding corruption, it is important to emphasize that His Excellency President Weah, during his recent meeting with integrity institutions in the country, reiterated his commitment to fight corruption robustly, pursuant to his unending desire for socio-economic transformation. Previously, in September 2020, His Excellency President Weah convened an anti-corruption conference to tackle corruption, which he refers to as an age-old menace. Thirdly, His Excellency President Weah has condemned reports of serial waves of death among public servants, particularly in Monrovia and its environs, and has assured the public of thorough and transparent investigation free of any outside influence, which is currently ongoing. Reports from these investigations will be shared with the public. With the resolve of His Excellency's leadership, we are optimistic that we will surmount these challenges and continue to deliver the kind of governance Liberia and Liberians deserve. At this juncture, let me express on behalf of His Excellency President Weah and the government and people of Liberia our deepest gratitude for the work of the United Nations Peace Building Support Office, which continues to prove critical in our peace building efforts. Liberia continues to be a beneficiary of the Peace Building Fund, particularly in the last 3 years. The PBF approved United States $25 million to support peace building priorities in Liberia. In closing,
sorry, Minister. It seems like we are encountering some technical problems. Please continue. We'll hope that because we don't hear you properly. Let's try again. Let's continue, Minister.
In closing, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me convey on behalf of His Excellency the President and the government and people of Liberia our satisfaction for the holding of this meeting and express the hope that the meeting will stimulate discussions on ways to galvanize additional resources to aid the efforts of the LRRC to deal with the refugee crisis and the National Elections Commission and partners in order to ensure free, fair, transparent, and credible elections in Liberia, an electoral process which His Excellency the President and his government remain resolute in terms of ensuring its credibility. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. We seem to have some slight technical problems with, but thank you so much for your statement. And I'm now happy to give the floor to the chairperson of the National Elections Commission of Liberia, Mrs. Davidetta Brown Lansana. You have the floor.
Much, Madam. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. The National Elections Commission of Liberia extols the far-sightedness of the Liberia configuration of the Peace-Building Commission ambassadorial level meeting in planning and implementing this dialogue. Members of the Board of Commissioners and staff of the NEC present compliments to Your Excellency
Mrs. Brown, it seems like we have some technical problems. We can't hear you properly.
I think the internet has an issue here.
Okay, now it sounds better now. Please go ahead.
As I was saying earlier, good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. The National Elections Commission of Liberia extols the far-sightedness of the Liberia configuration of the Peace-Building Commission ambassadorial level meeting in planning and implementing this dialogue. Members of the Board of Commissioners and staff of NEC present compliments to Your Excellency, Ms. Annan Karim Enestrom, Permanent Representative of Sweden to the United Nations and Chair of the Liberia configuration of the Peace-Building Commission and partners in supporting peace building in Liberia and throughout the sub-region and Africa as a whole, whose positive impact seeks to galvanize world peace. Your Excellency and Chair of the Liberia configuration of Peace-Building Commission, 14 years of civil war and the fragile peace in Liberia and the implication for the ongoing democratization process over the years have taught great lessons to the Liberia electoral process, that everyone should and must be part of the process of choosing their leaders in a free, fair, and credible electoral process for sustainability of national, regional, and international peace. The National Elections Commission of Liberia, under the current Board of Commissioners, has continued activities
Mrs. Brown Lansana, I would maybe, because we still have some
previous
technical
administrations aimed
Excuse
at
me.
integrity in the electoral process.
We still have some technical problems. I would suggest maybe that you turn off your video so we can hear your sound. Maybe that will help the sound. Thank you so much.
The National Elections Commission of Liberia, under the current Board of Commissioners, has continued activities from previous administrations aimed at sustaining inclusiveness and integrity of the electoral process. Being cognizant that free, fair, credible, and violent-free elections are inextricably linked to peace and stability, the NEC continues to engage all stakeholders to have a buy-in to the NEC electoral process as a way of ensuring that stakeholders take ownership of the process and its outcome. The stakeholders include civil society organizations, women and persons with disability, youth groups, faith-based organizations, local non-governmental organizations, community-based organizations, the media, and our main stakeholders, the political parties. Key to the concerns raised
Ms. Brown-Lansana, can you hear us? Because we cannot hear you at the moment. Mrs. Brown-Lansana, can you hear us? Otherwise, I suggest
Sorry,
that
if you can hear you well.
Yes, okay, good, good. Go ahead.
Your Excellency, pursuant to the joint resolution of the National Legislature, and in an effort to further enhance the integrity of the voter roll, the NEC Data Center initiated the cleaning of the voters' roll under the Inter-Party Consultative Committee, that is the IPCC mechanism. Political parties, data technicians were invited to the cleaning exercise. Also, as a result of concern for the voter roll, the UNDP, under its 2020-2024 project support to the National Elections Commission of Liberia, hired a data expert to assist the NEC Data Center. The NEC, through a request via the government of Liberia to the president of the ECOWAS Commission, recently welcomed 3 ECOWAS data experts who are currently supporting the NEC Data Center staff in conjunction with a UNDP data expert to integrate data from the recently held voter roll update and the exhibition to release the final registration roll. In this connection, the UNDP, ECOWAS, and NEC have held briefing sessions with international partners, national stakeholders, including political parties, and their data technicians as part of confidence building to further enhance the integrity of the voter roll. As a consequence of issues, including tracking of voters, arising from the recently held voter roll update process and the attending violent posture by some Liberians during that process, the NEC and the Justice Ministry, through the Liberia National Police, have resolved to strengthen collaboration during future voter roll update process. Liberia National Police was, as is done during polling and counting. In this regard, the NEC has strengthened the monitoring and evaluation section and security unit as a liaison between the NEC and the LNP to monitor and report in real time any potential for or incidents of violence during the period of political campaign, pre, during, and post-election. This collaboration is necessary in order to alert the national security apparatus for immediate action to remedy situations that may have the propensity to derail the democratic process. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, notably, the NEC has collaborated and recently held discussions in anticipation to work with the Women's Situation Room, Liberia branch, a conflict management mechanism to receive and report information on real or potential violent situations in order to address them. Also, with the support from UN Women, the NEC crafted a protocol and implementation plan to address issues of violence against women in election. The proposed protocol will strengthen the efforts of Liberia to effectively implement international and regional instruments related to the promotion of women's political participation and leadership, such as the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the Beijing Platform for Action, the Protocol on the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, on the Rights of Women in Africa, and the African Charter on Democracy and Governance. To these ends, the NEC incorporated into the Electoral Reform Bill currently before the Liberian National Legislature, Section 4.5, Paragraph 1B and C, that, quote, political party or coalition participating in commission is structured, and we shall have no less than 30% of each gender. A list of candidates submitted to the commission for an election shall have no less than 30% of the candidates on the list for each gender, unquote. The commission hopes that the legislature will pass this bill into law in the soonest possible time. This will ensure that more women will get on political parties' tickets as candidates, thus increasing the chances of being elected in both houses. In order to ensure that disputes are resolved in time to avert violence, a robust dispute resolution mechanism has been put into place at the NEC to ensure that voters get instant redress to their concerns during election. Election magistrates are trained in electoral dispute resolution mechanisms. Additionally, the Commission deploys dispute hearing clerks at every magisterial area to hear disputes as they arise. Meanwhile, in order to ensure a conflict-free election, the Commission has expeditiously heard and disposed of cases, some of which have been appealed to the Supreme Court. Some of these cases that are yet to be finally decided by the Supreme Court have implications for the printing and delivery of ballots and for the timely conduct of the special sanitary elections, national referendum, and the 2 by-elections on 8 December 2020. In conclusion, despite the challenges and the next efforts to mitigate them, one key hurdle in the delivery of the elections is the delayed funding of the processes leading to the December 8, 2020 elections. Of a budget of $13.5 million submitted to government, the Commission has so far received $6 million of that amount. With less than a month to the election, the receipt of the remaining funds is critical to holding of the election and curtailing electoral violence. In this light, the NEC seeks the support of all stakeholders for the conduct of these elections for the sustenance of peace and stability in Liberia. Finally, Your Excellency, Ms. Anan Karim Enestrom, the NEC wishes to thank you for this platform to present itself at this meeting and assures you of our continued commitment to peaceful electoral process. We want to thank the United Nations, international donor partners, and ECOWAS for their unwavering support to the democratic process in Liberia. We also want to thank the government of Liberia for its commitment to the conduct of free, fair, credible, and violence-free election in Liberia. I thank you.
And let me thank you, Ms. Brown Lansana, for your update on the preparations for the elections. Thank you so much, and I apologize for that we seem to have some technical problems, but it seemed that we were able to solve that at the end. So thank you so much for that update. And I now like to give the floor to the Special Representative of the Secretary General and the head of UNIVAS, Mr. Mohammed Ibn Chambas. You have the floor, Mr. Chambas.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Madam Chairperson. And thank you also for your expression of condolence on the passing away of former President Rawlings. You will understand, as a Ghanaian myself, I appreciate this. Former President Rawlings was someone who had Liberia at heart and was one of those early pioneers in committing troops to form the ECOMOG, which played a very important role in returning Liberia to peace and stability. And also during his tenure as chair of ECOWAS, his country, Ghana, hosted several peace negotiations in Accra, in Akosombo, and other parts of the country to help bring peace to Liberia. He was indeed a voice of the voiceless, and many ordinary Liberians saw him as one of their champions. Distinguished Honorable Foreign Minister and other senior government officials of Liberia, distinguished members of the Peace Building Commission, the Liberia Confederation, my dear colleagues on the UN side, let me especially acknowledge ASG Oscar Taranko and the RC Kingsley, who is joining us from Monrovia. I would like to indeed commend members of the Peace Building Commission for their sustained interest and support to the government of His Excellency President George Weah and the good people of Liberia. Special thanks equally go to Swedish chair of Liberian Confederation for maintaining the momentum and keeping international actors engaged in supporting the government of Liberia address its peace-building priorities, including in the critical areas of reconciliation, social cohesion, and inclusivity. In this effort, the Commission's regional perspective and regional experience are particularly valuable. Madam Chairperson, Excellencies, today's meeting comes in the context of 5 presidential elections in the West African sub-region. Just last month, 2 of these in Guinea on 18th October and in Cote d'Ivoire on 31st October took place in the Mano River Union Basin. And the fallout of these elections are already being felt in Liberia. As of 9 November, according to reports, more than 9,000 Ivorians have already fled to neighboring countries, 92% of whom are registered in Liberia. And indeed, a first multi-sectorial joint assessment mission led by the Honorable Minister of Interior of Liberia and 9 UN agencies is currently making a needs assessment evaluation in the area where these refugees are. This is a constant reminder that we need to remain vigilant and not take advances in democratic governance and consolidation for granted. Against these highly polarized contexts of these elections, we have been working tirelessly with partners, including governments, political parties, civil society, women and youth groups, the ECOWAS, the AU, the Mano River Union Secretariat, and other regional organizations in an effort to contribute to credible, transparent, inclusive elections in the interest of regional stability and peace. On 8 December, Liberia will also be holding midterm senatorial elections, as Madam, the President of the Electoral Commission has told us, a referendum on constitutional reform, as well as 2 parliamentary by-elections, which were postponed due to COVID-19 and funding constraints. These elections and their outcome will pose a significant test to democracy, peace building, and sustaining peace in Liberia over the coming months. Tensions have risen over election-related issues, including voters' roll exercise, voters' roll update, public sensitization, and the capacity of NEC to conduct a 3-in-1 election, leading for calls for a postponement. However, the deployment last October of 2 separate technical support teams from the ECOWAS and UNDP, assisting the Electoral Commission in the cleanup of the voter roll and enhancing transparency, has to a large extent laid these concerns to rest. I'm pleased that on 26 October, the Collaborating Political Parties, COP, announced the suspension of its protest against the voter roll update, which was formally concluded on 6 November. Nearly 300,000 new voters have been registered, of which 40% are female. This is a huge success. Against these multiple challenges, I would like to join others in commending the National Electoral Commission and its chairperson, who has been with us, and other commissioners, of course, for the efforts to ensure the timely holding of the polls and to ensure credible elections. Liberia has a strong history of women's participation and leadership in peace building and reconstruction processes, which should be harnessed in addressing existing challenges. Several special measures have been adopted and implemented to increase participation of women, especially in political and public life, education, and employment, to accelerate progress in achieving substantive equality between women and men in these sectors. The expected Affirmative Action Bill, or Equal Representation and Participation Act, which establishes a quota for women in Parliament, as well as the Decent Work Act, which endorses several rights and principles in favor of women. Both establish specific measures to increase participation of women in politics. At the policy level, the National Gender Policy of 2018 calls for enhancing the number of female civil servants. Additionally, strategies such as the National Policy on Girls' Education, launched in 2006 and revised in 2013, and the Women Entrepreneurship Program also includes special measures to improve women and girls' access to education and employment. However, several gender audits conducted in 2018 and 2019 in security institutions, such as the National Police, the LMP, and the Liberian Fire Service, LFS, stress the persistence of values and behaviors that discriminate against women. Women officers face humiliation and degradation in the form of physical abuse, threat of violence, or verbal insults, which is highly degrading to female recruits, according to this report. In many instances, female recruits have abandoned training and have returned to civilian life. Also, the majority of female officers are assigned to administrative duties like clerical and secretarial work. On the other hand, Liberia was the only country in the region where a national task force against COVID-19 pandemic included civil society and women's organizations as a result of an intervention by the Minister of Gender, Children, and Social Protection, for which we commend her. The Ministry of Gender, Children, and Social Protection also has a hotline for reporting rapid response of sexual and gender-based violence, SGBV cases. COVID-19 prevention messages also carry SGBV prevention messages as well. A dedicated court handling SGBV cases is fully functioning and prosecutions are ongoing. Regarding the implementation of the UN Resolution 1325 of 2000, which we are celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, Liberia adopted a 2019 to 2023 National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security, which is the overarching national document that provides guidance on the implementation of 1325. The Liberian Second Action Plan, developed with support from the Peace Building Fund, stresses the need for gender-sensitive approaches to peace and stability and emphasizes building on inclusive societies where women's rights are protected, women's and girls' empowerment, and full participation in national decision-making is promoted. Yet, as described, although the inclusion of women in peace-building processes has gained momentum over the last 10 years, many challenges, in particular, in the area of implementation and allocation of resources remain. Your Excellency, Madam Chairperson, Excellencies, Liberia continues to be affected by an economic crisis, high inflation and a low tax base, a balance of payments deficit, and relatively heavy debt burden. In addition, issues of accountability and reconciliation remain to be addressed since the end of the Civil War. Moreover, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated pre-existing inequalities, induced loss of livelihoods, and limited access to education and justice, thereby stalling progress towards the attainment of the SDGs. Against this context, simmering discontent can easily be manipulated and trigger political violence. In the face of the foregoing, one can easily conclude that Liberia continues to require the political and financial support of the international community to accompany its democratic transition. The Peacebuilding Commission has and continues to play a key role in the mobilization of this support. The UN has an important role to accompany Liberia, undertaking key structural reforms beyond the upcoming elections, which will be crucial to address some of the root causes of conflict in the country. I would highlight the contribution of Secretary General's Peacebuilding Fund, which over the past 3 years has approved $25 million in support of Liberia's peacebuilding priorities, including on reconciliation, youth and women empowerment, peaceful resolution of land conflicts, and on social cohesion and cross-border security. I'd also like to commend financial institutions such as the World Bank, the IMF, and the African Development Bank for their support to the government of Liberia in sustaining peace and development. We have been advised of a funding gap for the elections, which I think Madam Chair of Electoral Commission has also brought to fore. Let us make an effort, particularly international community and partners, to help find the resources to fill this gap, to lend support to the government of Liberia to ensure the holding of inclusive, transparent, and credible elections in order to secure the remarkable peace-building gains that Liberia, with its partners, have achieved to date. Once again, I thank Honorable Minister for making time to be with us today, and Madam Chair and your members of the Peacebuilding Configuration on Liberia for continuing to stand by Liberia. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chambas, and let me also thank you, the chairperson of the Election Commission, and the Foreign Minister also for shedding light on the work being done when it comes to enhancing the gender equality in Liberia. I mean, we see both, as you all have pointed at, progress, and we really welcome the commitment of the government of Liberia, including the president, but we also see remaining challenges, not least in the peacebuilding area. So thank you so much for raising this issue, as well as the chairpersons, and you also reinforced that, Mr. Chambas, the existing funding gap in the ahead of the elections. Let me now turn to the resident coordinator in Liberia, Mr. Kingsley Amaning. We have already heard of the good cooperation and praise for the cooperation in the preparations of the elections with the UNDP, but we look forward very much, Mr. Amaning, for your update on further measures that the UN is doing in preparation of the elections in Liberia. Mr. Amaning, you have the floor. We cannot hear you, Mr. Manning. Okay, we'll do another attempt. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and distinguished members of the Peace Building Commission configuration for Liberia, Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs and officials of the government of Liberia, Special Representative of the Secretary General for West Africa and the Sahel and the head of UNOWAS, Assistant Secretary General for Peace Building, dear colleagues in the UN, Your Excellencies, ambassadors in Liberia, Special Ambassador for ECOWAS. Permit me to commend the members of the Peace Building Commission, Liberia Configuration, for their steadfast engagement and support to Liberia and towards the country team since...
We do not...
You still can't hear? Hello? 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 What has happened?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
You can hear me now? Yeah.
Yeah, we hear you.
All right. Permit me to commend the members of the Peace Building Commission, Liberia Confederation, for their steadfast engagement and support to Liberia and the UN country team here since September 2010. I also wish to commend the tireless efforts of the chair for the Liberian Confederation of the Peace Building Commission, Excellency, Madam Anna Karin Enestro, permanent representative of Sweden to the UN, for maintaining international attention and also for supporting the government and people of Liberia in their efforts to address peace-building priorities, including some critical areas of reconciliation. Madam Chair, Liberia has held 3 successful multi-party elections since 2005. The most recent election held in 2017 was Liberian-owned and was commended by domestic and international observers who assessed it as generally peaceful and credible, even if they also noted some challenges related to voter identification. The 2017 elections resulted in the first democratic transition of power from one president to another and from one party also to another. Notwithstanding these successes, there is still, or there appears not to be enough confidence among the political competitors, and especially in the public, that national institutions alone can organize free, fair, and transparent elections and conduct their duties with professionalism, neutrality, and integrity. At the beginning of this year, the entire international community here in Liberia advised Liberians through a joint declaration to fully make use of Liberia's institutions to resolve all their grievances and all their problems. As you very well know, these institutions had been resuscitated or built with considerable investment and cost to the international community in terms of resources and time and expertise and just continuous attention. And therefore, we believe that these are investments that Liberians could draw on. This declaration that was jointly made has been our guide as international community in this country in our efforts to support the government and people of Liberia in all their endeavors. As you have heard from the chairperson of the commission of the NEC, Liberia will hold midterm senatorial elections, a national referendum on a constitutional reform, as well as 2 representative by-elections on December 8, following the postponement due to COVID-19 and funding constraints. The 3-in-1 exercise comes at a time that is marked by uncertainties of a pandemic with grave political and socioeconomic impacts on the communities and on the government coffers. While Liberia has demonstrated its ability to conduct credible polls, it is important to note that to gain public confidence, it will be necessary that we undertake certain measures to address persistent challenges in the electoral process, measures to mitigate the risks of electoral violence, encourage the full participation of all voters, and deliver on Liberians' high expectation for their democracy, to which they are totally entitled. Liberia's institutions and free and open political space are therefore priceless ingredients for inclusive, transparent, and accountable elections. It is for this reason that, as mentioned by previous speakers, there has been the deployment of 2 separate technical support teams from the Economic Community of West Africa and the UNDP to assist the National Elections Commission in the cleanup and the cleanup of the voter roll and enhance transparency as a measure to allay all fears and to inspire confidence in the public so that tensions could be reduced. The use of biometric registration and biometric voting systems, hopefully in 2023, is a requirement which all the political competitors want the international community to commit itself to. Not only because it will help modernize the voter roll, but we all believe would also protect the integrity of each vote and the results. Madam Chair, the pervasiveness of disinformation, hate speech, and inflammatory language made possible especially by social media is another area of concern, because it has a propensity to trigger violence. And we have seen, we come very close to this in Liberia on several occasions. In strong collaboration with ECOWAS and with the full support of the international partners, the UN here has been regularly meeting with the government, the Coalition for Democratic Change at the CDC, which is the ruling government, the collaborating political party, the CPP, and the Electoral Commission, as well as several interest groups. The whole objective has been to engage these stakeholders in a constructive exchange on current pertinent issues, to provide a forum for airing of grievances, to discuss sustenance of peace, and to sensitize political leaders on the fact that they would be held personally accountable for any violence perpetuated by their supporters. The forum created a space for engagement between the government and political parties and overturned, if not to say stemmed, the downward spiral of events. The United Nations Office for West Africa and the Sahel remains in close consultations with the Resident Coordinator's Office over peace and security matters in Liberia. And the Mano River Union and the SRSG chambers have always offered and have used their good offices to resolve issues which could otherwise have landed us in serious troubles of violence. We continue to proactively seek engagement to ensure that estrangements are mitigated. Therefore, Madam Chairperson, Excellencies, with the measures outlined above, including the threat of sanctions and the active collaboration of the international partners, the upcoming elections should not generate extreme competition, because after all, it's only senatorial. But unfortunately, it has in some areas. But thankfully, this is largely due to complications of personalities and local factors. And we commit ourselves to dealing with them whenever they arise. Your Excellencies, in 2005, Liberia's Ellen Johnson Sirleaf became the first elected female head of state in Africa, marking thus a milestone for the country and for the continent. Despite this achievement, another notable positive development, such as the Affirmative Action Bill, Liberian women continue to struggle to obtain leadership roles in politics. Even as the government celebrated the 20th anniversary of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 on a couple of days ago, indicative facts and figures show the decreasing numbers of women in government, most notably in the legislature and the executive branches. It has fallen from 22% in 2014 to 10.6% in 2017. Recent amendments to the election law introduced a requirement that parties must endeavor to ensure that they nominate no less than 30% of each gender. Regrettably, all but one of the political coalitions has fallen short of the provision. Given that only 17% of candidates for the special senatorial election are women, that is 20 of the 118 candidates, and that the only female senator seat out of 30 senatorial seats is up for re-election, and recognizing the disproportionate challenges women face to get elected, we run the risk of ending up with an all-male Senate. This might create a perception of women as ineffective politicians that would contribute to a glass ceiling, hindering women's full participation in the 2023 national elections. And this is of extreme concern to all of us in this country. In addition, we must also recognize that opportunities for women outside of the capital to participate in politics are severely limited by the country's centralized political structure. Local opportunities for women's participation are further restricted by the conspicuous absence of elections for chieftaincy posts, which are heavily dominated by men. In that regard, the UN is working closely with the government to operationalize the Local Government Act, sequence political and administrative as well as fiscal decentralization, and push for the passage of the act to establish the Ministry of Local Government. But this is suffering from lack of resource and to some extent commitment. And this is an area we will require international support in making sure that we register the minimum of support of success. Civil societies continue to play a vital role in furthering women's participation in politics and elections. And much of this work is conducted by national women's groups, often in partnership or with technical assistance from international actors, notably the UN Women and the other UN agencies, and bilateral partners. And these are focused on harnessing a sense of solidarity among women to overcome the obstacles they encounter. But we are a very long way away from success. Madam Chair, Excellencies, as we approach December 8, what is required is the continued engagement of political leaders, the sustained interest of the international community to provide technical and financial support for the elections, and commitment from the international community to impose sanctions when required on those who bear the greatest responsibility for loss of life and departure from peace in this democratic exercise. And also we require support for civil societies to undertake widespread sensitization. As has just been mentioned, there is a gap in the funding for the elections, and there is equally a gap in the funding for sensitization of the community in terms of what is required and the behavior required during elections. The good news, though, is that all parties have agreed that while the election might not be perfect, all stakeholders will work assiduously together towards an improved presidential and legislative elections in 2023, when the stakes would have been much higher. Madam Chair, Your Excellencies, we wish to acknowledge the critical support received from the Peace Building Fund over the last 3 years in support of Liberia's peace building priorities. The approval of 25 million to Liberia has provided flexible and catalytic support in areas including the development of the second phase of the Liberian National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security 2019. The Peace Building Fund has also approved a second phase of cross-border cooperation with Côte d'Ivoire, focusing on social cohesion and security across and around the border. Since this has been mentioned before me, I would not enter into any details, and will not also, since SRSG has elaborated a lot on the challenges we face on our border and in the sub-region, I would not go into it. I would, however, want to say that despite UNMIL's successful completion of mandate and its subsequent departure, we still fully acknowledge that Liberia remains with quite a good number of challenges. The Secretary General, our boss, has emphasized the imperative need for adequate, predictable, and sustainable financing for peace building. And this is particularly important in transition settings such as we have in Liberia, where economic challenges have dwindled the capacity of the state and its component communities to respond to basic challenges of life, and therefore makes both communities and the state, leave them in a state of volatility. However, I should note the transition planning and implementation in Liberia, including the strengthened Resident Coordinator's Office, whose capacity was graciously maintained due to the generous support by Norway in 2018 and Germany, Ireland, and the UK in 2019. Although it was a complex system of financing, in the end, the office with these resources have delivered, and is arguably one of the best transitions from UN missions. And the country team acknowledges this with gratitude. The continued efforts to maintain and sustain peace after the mission's drawdown requires predictable resources to bridge critical gaps in capacity and programs for sustaining peace during and beyond complicated transition processes as we are witnessing now. And the experiences that we have accumulated in this office in Liberia could serve as one of the models for upcoming UN transitions in several parts of the world. And ours can be reviewed and lessons learned from it. To conclude, Madam Chair, Your Excellencies, I wish to emphasize the need for the configuration to continue as a valued partner, effective advocate, and trusted advisor to Liberia. I also wish to urge the international partners, including the financial institutions, to continue to provide financial and other support towards the holding of transparent and credible elections, and to deliver Liberia's high expectation for their democracy and sustain the hard-won peace. I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Amaning, not only for describing the close and very good cooperation between the United Nations in Liberia and the government, but also pointing at the challenges, not only to the running up of the elections, but also to the country, and pointing at the lessons learned of the transition, which I think is very, very important. And I can ensure you and the other participants that I intend to continue to stand by the side of Liberia with this configuration. So we will continue to follow the situation very closely, of course, as the country progress towards sustainable peace. Can I also thank you, and I also said for others on pointing to the challenges and the difficulties that's facing women when it comes to participation in politics in Liberia. And I took note of the risk that you are raising of an all-male Senate. I think it's important what you said about the link between the participation in political life and resources and rights. These linkages need to be there. So thank you so much. And I need, before I give the floor to Oscar Bloor from the Election Coordination Committee, I just need to apologize because it seems that the technical problems is a bit on my side, sitting here on the 46th floor of one dog plaza. So I apologize that problems doesn't seem to be in Monrovia. It seems to be here in New York in my office. So my apologies for that. But with that, I'm very happy to hand over the floor to Oscar Bloor from the Election Coordination Committee. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Liberia Configuration of the Peace Building Commission, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I speak on behalf of 7 civil society organizations that make up the Elections Coordinating Committee, Liberia's largest national domestic election observation group. Since the end of the Civil War, Liberia has had 3 successive elections, 2005, 2011, and 2017, including a peaceful political transition in 2017 when the Unity Party-led government lost the elections to the Coalition for Democratic Change, CDC. These elections were declared to be free, fair, transparent, and credible. Despite this declaration and the conduct of other elections, and a considerable progress made in peace consolidation, the prevailing stability in the country remains fragile, owing mainly to the continual presence of factors that led to the Civil War. According to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC, those issues include economic, social, civil, and political inequalities, land disputes, and inappropriate mechanisms for the resolution of disputes. Consolidating peace in Liberia therefore requires a collective approach in addressing forms of social and economic inequalities that have historical sources of conflict. The impact of the global economic downturn, exacerbated by COVID-19, has slowed the rate of economic growth in Liberia. The government has undertaken a number of economic reform initiatives and made efforts to diversify the economy through investments in the agricultural sector. It will also be critical for the government, in strong collaboration with the private sector, to ensure employment for a huge number of young people, both men and women, and to decelerate poverty. The rule of law and access to justice require a functional judiciary. The courts have a significant responsibility in dispensing justice irrespective of social or economic status. Like the police, the judiciary faces significant challenges: limited institutional capacities, logistical and infrastructure limitations, and insufficient funding to cover operational and recurring costs continue to be major constraints. It is critically important that these challenges are adequately addressed and that support for police reforms is matched by commensurate progress in strengthening judicial and correctional institutions. National media and public opinion surveys consistently highlight law and order as a priority concern. This partly reflects continual lack of public confidence in national security institutions and the criminal justice system, leading people to take justice into their own hands. These results are further compounded by limited progress in harmonizing the statutory and customary justice systems. While gains have been made in a reconciliation process, concerns remain around citizens' trust in state institutions. The government must take concrete steps to address the many divisive issues rooted in the country's past, which continue to have ramifications for peace consolidation efforts. Turn to peaceful and credible elections. As the 2020 senatorial election draws near, the issue of electoral security remains a concern. Opposing political groups have clashed repeatedly this year, occasionally violently, notably in Monrovia, Bomi, and Grand Jide counties. Although police deployment numbers have increased outside Monrovia and several police stations have been rehabilitated, a police presence beyond county capitals remains limited. The Liberian National Police LNP is on an obligation to ensure effective security for the conduct of free, fair, and transparent elections in keeping with international norms and practices, and uphold human rights standards, as well as demonstrate professional, impartial, neutral, and non-intimidating conduct. Electoral security also borders on the rule of law. Like the police, the judiciary must demonstrate neutrality and be seen as rendering justice impartially in adjudicating all electoral disputes. Second, election administration. The 2017 general elections were largely managed by the National Elections Commission with technical and logistical support from its national development partners. The outcome of the conduct of the senatorial elections and national referendum will, to a large extent, determine the capacity of the NEC to plan and execute the 2023 elections. In addition to timely procurement of election materials, election administration is also closely tied to the credibility of the voter roll and the extent to which political parties and citizens trust the roll. In that regard, the deployment of a technical team by the Economic Community of West African State, ECOWAS, and UNDP to support the NEC clean up the voter roll is timely. This is an opportunity to improve the quality of the voter roll and enable the political parties to reach a consensus that the voter roll may not be 100% perfect, but that it is credible enough to be used for the conduct of the election. Women's political representation and participation. The NEC has certified 118 persons to contest for 15 seats. Of this number, 18 are women, and one of them is the only sitting female senator seeking re-election. If she loses her bid and no other woman is elected to the Senate, then we will be left with an all-male Senate, which will not be reflective of the country's diversity. Such a situation will undermine women's representation in political leadership and decision-making processes. I therefore propose the following recommendations. 1, that the government develops a national strategy and planning process involving major stakeholders, including political parties, the NEC, civil society organizations, to respond to electoral security issues for the upcoming elections and 2023 national elections. The government should take steps to diversify the economy and make it less extractive-driven. Sustained investment in agriculture by the government shall be considered a high priority, as it will not only increase food production, but also expand livelihood opportunities. Resources for election management should be allocated in the national budget and made available in an escrow account at least 6 months to the election. The cleaning of the voter roll needs to be done in a transparent and inclusive manner so that political stakeholders can have confidence in its outcomes. I respectfully submit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Blower. And as I've said before, the role of civil society in elections, of course, key. And thank you so much for the recommendations that you have left with us and with the government, but also that you have pointed to the important roles played by the police and judiciary in the preparations, but also during the elections. With that, I'd like to thank all briefers for your very valuable comments. And I will now open up the floor for colleagues, and I will start with the permanent representative of Morocco, my good friend and colleague, Ambassador Omar Hilale. Omar, you have the floor. And I see that Omar is speaking. We'll see if I can get his attention. If not, I will pass the floor. We'll get back to Omar. I will pass the floor to the permanent representative of Egypt, my good friend and Ambassador, Permanent Representative Mohammed Idris. Mohammed, you had the floor.
Thank you very much, dear Madam Chairperson, dear Anna Karen, for convening this important meeting, and would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and appreciate the presence and presentation of actually Foreign Minister of Liberia, dear brother Minister Kimaya. We miss you in New York, and best wishes always to you and Sister Liberia. And the same goes to the chairperson of the National Elections Commission of Liberia and the Honorable SRSG of UNOAS, dear Excellency Bichambas, and the UN Resident Coordinator in Liberia, and the representative of the civil society. And I'd like also to thank and appreciate, of course, the role and presence of dear friend ACG Oscar and PBSO team. Actually, this presentation reminded me of the very important visit we had to Liberia during the PBC visit to the Mano River region. We really witnessed on the ground lots of the important aspects and needs which are highlighted. And really today's meeting offered a good opportunity to learn about the peace-building priorities of Liberia in the context of COVID-19 and the ongoing preparation for Liberia's tripartite election endeavor, the senatorial elections, the referendum, the two representative by-elections, and amid of an increasing security risks related to the cross-border challenges in the sub-region. In this regard, I would like to share the following few points. First, the PBC role remains indispensable to continue mobilizing international attention and support to nationally owned and led peace-building priorities in Liberia in order to mitigate the destabilizing socioeconomic impacts of COVID-19 and the risk of reversing the peace gains in Liberia. Second, it is critical to prioritize investment in building responsive and effective national institutions and enhance human capacity building. In this connection, we welcome the UNDP Electoral Assistance Project that aims at supporting the institutional capacity development of the National Elections Commission. Third, UNOAS has a key role in advancing a comprehensive, integrated, and regional approach with a view to address the cross-border challenges in the region. The PBF allocated funding to this aspect is significant. However, we need to explore more ways to scale up the cross-border projects, including through partnering with IFIs. Fourth, more efforts are needed to foster a coherent and coordinated response to Liberia's peace-building priorities in order to avoid fragmentation and duplication of efforts. Last but not least, the role of women and youth can't be overstated. It is important to continue all efforts to ensure their inclusion in building a stable and prosperous future in Liberia. To conclude, I wish to reiterate Egypt's unwavering support and commitment to accompany our brothers and sisters in Liberia in their journey towards lasting peace and stability. Egypt will continue to provide technical support, training, capacity building programs to Liberia in the areas of national priorities, including through the Egyptian Agency of Partnership for Development and the Cairo International Center for Conflict Resolution, Peacekeeping, and Peace Building. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mohammed, and thank you also for the support that you are lending to Liberia. Very much appreciated. Let me now give the floor to the permanent representative of Morocco, Ambassador Omar Hilale, and he will be followed by the deputy permanent representative of the EU delegation. Ambassador Omar, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, my good friend Anna Karin. I'm very sorry I have been in another meeting and I was speaking. But I'm very happy to join you and would like to thank you for organizing this important meeting with such informative briefers. I wish to seize this opportunity of this meeting to hail the government and people of Liberia for making significant strides in the conduct of peaceful and credible elections, particularly in the recent times, marked by the COVID pandemic and by electoral preparations in the country. Indeed, I wish to stress that the strengthening of Liberia's democracy and peace sustenance also hinges on the success of the December 8 elections. We therefore express gratitude for the level of critical support to the Liberian national elections, including in terms of institutional capacity, development from the United Nations through UNDP, election support projects, and other partners and stakeholders, as well as the ECOWAS. However, I wish to point that funding gap remains huge, despite the progress made, including a significant contribution by the government of Liberia toward the proposed budget for the elections. We, therefore, call on the international community, as well as on friends of Liberia, to source the additional funding needed to ensure a smooth and successful process. The commitment from all stakeholders is also critical to ensure a peaceful, inclusive, and successful electoral process. I wish in this regard to commend the Liberia configuration and the very able Swedish leadership, the PBC and the PBF, for their dedication and contribution to the Liberian peace building process. We commend the work done by PBF over the last years in Liberia, and with the approbation of 25 million US dollars in support of national building priorities, including to the development of the second phase of Liberia National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security in 2019. On bilateral level, the historical and brotherly relationship between Morocco and Liberia garnered new milestone recently with the signing of 3 cooperation agreements in the crucial field of higher education and scientific research, agriculture, and health. This agreement were concluded early this month, just 10 days, in Morocco, during the first official visit paid by our dear brother, Ambassador Kumeya, outside his country, since his appointment as foreign minister, which is also a token of the depth of the Moroccan-Liberian bilateral ties on all levels of common interest. Some of the inked memoranda of understanding are particularly timely with the continued adverse effects of COVID pandemic, as they target priority areas, namely maternal, child, and neonatal health, epidemiological surveillance, in particular the establishment of a pandemic alert and response system, capacity building of human resources, medical coverage, and prevention and fight against non-communicable and communicable disease. To conclude, Madam Chair, my country voices the calls made by our Liberian colleagues and remains committed to the peace, security, stability, and development of Liberia. It is our continued duty to bring helping hand to Liberia where it is indeed, particularly in this time. I thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, my good friend, Ambassador Omar. Thanks for your support to peace building, to this configuration, but also your national support to Liberia. Thank you so much. I'm now happy to give the floor to the Deputy Permanent Representative of the EU delegation, Silvio Gonzato, followed by the Deputy Permanent Representative of Norway. Silvio, you have the floor.
Thank you, Anna Karin, and thank you really for bringing together so many briefers from Liberia in particular. It's been extremely informative and useful. We've been accompanying Liberia in its transition and peace building process for 17 years now, and promoting peace, stability, and reconciliation in this country continue to be our top priority. Clearly, as many have said, the upcoming elections and the referendum on the constitutional amendments are a crucial test for Liberia's democratic consolidation. We are ready to support, and we do support the government in ensuring free, fair, and peaceful processes in this respect. We are particularly looking at 3 aspects of the process, the electoral process. The first one is the fact that we are aware that there were challenges in the preparations of the election. In particular, the voter roll update was carried out with limited resources and with limited time, which raises some concern. And we've heard about reports of incidents that would constitute serious irregularities and which resulted also in violence. The second aspect that we are looking at is the marginalization of women in political leadership and in political leadership positions. And that's something that we need to overcome. These elections, provide an opportunity. At the moment, there is only one female senator, but we are aware of the fact that there are currently female candidates on the ballot, and that this could improve the situation. And we are convinced that, if elected, female senators could inject new dynamism in the efforts to sustain peace. And thirdly, we're also watching at the situation in neighboring countries. We are concerned that there could be spillover effects, particularly from the elections in Guinea and the Ivory Coast. And this was why we encourage ECOWAS to play an active role in supporting regional stability and being engaged on the ground. Concretely, how do we support the peaceful elections in Liberia? We have mobilized, some funding for the helping ECOWAS prevent election-related violence before and after the elections through preventive diplomacy and support to civil society organizations that can advocate and can do some advocacy and also put in place preventive measures with specific focus on women, youth, and religious leaders. We also are organizing through our delegation in Monrovia, together with the member states of the EU present on the ground, some monitoring of the electoral preparations. And we are in close contact in that respect with the National Election Commission, and I welcome the presence of the President of the Commission with UNDP and with ECOWAS. And on election day, we will organize a diplomatic watch. Finally, we've also supported the deployment of ECOWAS experts that were mentioned by the chair of the National Election Commission. And I'm happy to hear that they've been helpful in this respect. We also think that mobilizing and engaging Liberia's youth in order to prevent violence, and to support interreligious dialogue is extremely important. For the more long term, we need to continue to consolidate hard-won peace-building gains in Liberia, and we will continue to encourage and support good governance reforms, institution building, social cohesion, and gender equality. In that respect, I welcome the reference made by the Foreign Minister to the measures taken to address sexual and gender-based violence. And I know that the EU, through its Spotlight initiative, is also helping the government in this respect. I have three questions, if I may, Anna Karin. The first one is, when will the next presidential, parliamentary, and Senate elections take place based on the different scenarios of the outcome of the constitutional changes, which are going to be put to the people of Liberia? The second one is regarding the voter roll. Since there have been reports about irregularities in its preparation, what are the measures that the government has taken to safeguard us against the fraud and irregularities, such as voter tracking or double votes? And finally, what in the views of the government, what is the view of the government, what is needed to conduct an in-depth update of the voter roll in time for the next presidential elections? Sorry for taking so long. Thank you, Anna Karin.
Thank you so much, Silvio, and thank you for the very important support from the European Union. I'd now like to give the floor to the Deputy Permanent Representative of Norway, Odd Inge Kvalheim, followed by the Deputy Permanent Representative of Germany. Odd Inge, you have the floor.
Thank you, Anna Karin. Thank you for so brilliantly leading this configuration and for convening us today. Honorable Minister, dear presenters, all protocols observed. First, I would like to commend the Liberian government on the rapid response to COVID-19 and on the inclusion of women and youth. Let me build on Leymah Gbowey's powerful words. Women are no observers of conflict. Why then should they be observing conflict resolution? The same is true, I would say, for crisis and crisis management. The women of Liberia have inspired us all with their strength and have the right to be involved at every level of decision making. Now, this year has been challenging for all. It has demonstrated the need for a strong partnership and global cooperation. The multilateral system is key. This is made evident also in Liberia. The National Election Committee will play a crucial role in securing transparent and inclusive elections in December. A reliable voter roll is central in order to obtain credibility for the election. Further, voter education and information is crucial. In the current situation, it's important to ensure all protocols to prevent COVID-19 whilst maintaining the voters' right to vote. Adequate training and sufficient and foreseeable funding are key factors to a credible election. Finally, in September, President Weah launched the roadmap to end rape and sexual and gender-based violence in Liberia. Norway supports this important initiative. The high incidence rate of rape and sexual harassment, impunity of perpetrators, and lack of support for survivors are challenges that threaten social and economic development in Liberia. Women's participation in the society, including elections, depend on upholding human rights and combating sexual and gender-based violence. Thank you so much, Ann-Karin.
Thank you very much, Odding, and for the support of Norway to Liberia. And I'd like to give the floor to the Deputy Permanent Representative of Germany, Günther Sotter, followed by the Deputy Permanent Representative of Ireland. Günther, you have the floor.
Anna-Karin, thank you so much. And thanks also to our briefers. It's good and important that we have a strong Liberian participation today. I would like to make three short points, one on the upcoming elections, one on COVID-19, and one on root causes of conflict. On the elections and the referendum, we would very much like to thank ECOWAS and UNDP for the technical mission that has been reviewing the voters' roll. And like Silvio for the European Union, we continue to be worried about the quality of the voters' roll, and we hope that additional improvements can be made. We too see the regional dimension and the importance of credible and fair elections that are considered legitimate for the country and beyond the country. I would also like to say in this context that we would very much welcome a coordinated diplomatic election observation comprising both members of the diplomatic corps on the ground and, to the extent possible, of the UN country team. Improving the electoral system will continue to be an issue beyond the upcoming elections. This is work in progress. We therefore strongly encourage the government of Liberia to follow the recommendations of the ECOWAS technical mission and by the Supreme Court already in 2017. My second observation is on the situation regarding COVID-19. We have witnessed, thanks to God, progress in Liberia in peace building in recent years. And we are applauding the Liberian government on what has been achieved. Now it will be important to make sure that these gains be secured in spite of difficult circumstances which are exacerbated by COVID-19. We will certainly stand ready to do so in the framework of the United Nations and the framework of the European Union. We welcome the World Bank's implementation of a COVID-19 emergency response project, and we believe that it can play an important role. Yet it is clear that further remedies will be needed in order to make sure that socio-economic problems that persist and that are exacerbated be addressed. The work of the European Union will play an important role in this. My third and last remark is on the underlying issues that will need to be addressed, that we will need to continue to follow closely regarding root causes of conflict. One important element here is transitional justice. This needs to be tackled on an operational level in order to secure the peace-building gains that have been achieved over the last years. A second element, this has been mentioned by other colleagues before, is the importance of an inclusive political process. And the role of women in this process will be of particular relevance. In this context, Anna-Karin, let me thank you once again for the virtual meeting that you held with civil society representatives in June 2020, including with women's civil rights organizations. Also, the virtual visit to Liberia by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund earlier this year has been an important element. And it's good that in all these instances, the dimension of gender for peace building has played an important role. Let me conclude by underlining that as a passionate contributor to the Peace Building Fund, Germany will continue to contribute to improving the situation in Liberia. And in doing that, we will continue to attach particular importance to the strengthening of women's rights and participation in peace building. Thanks so much, Anna-Karin.
Thank you so much, Günther. Thanks for your support, including your financial support to the Peace Building Fund. We have heard from many of the briefers how important that fund is on the ground. I also will let our friends from Monrovia come in later on, and I'm sure that they would like to comment on your 3 points. And I think it's important also that you raise the underlying and root causes for the conflict. So thank you so much. I will now give the floor to the Deputy Permanent Representative of Ireland, Jimmy Kelly, followed by the Deputy Permanent Representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you for convening this meeting. And our thanks also to Foreign Minister Kamaya and all our very informative briefers this morning. We really welcome the opportunity to participate in what's a very timely, important discussion. Like others, we see the upcoming elections as a litmus test for peace consolidation, both within Liberia and internationally. So it's important, I think, that all colleagues around the table, the Government of Liberia, the UN family, civil society and international partners agree today on concrete actions that they can take over the remaining 4 weeks to help support free, fair, credible and inclusive elections. Ireland is very pleased to see a strong commitment by the government and the National Elections Commission to holding transparent, peaceful and inclusive elections. We acknowledge too the challenges that this process has faced, including, of course, due to COVID-19, and we commend the government and people of Liberia for their efforts in that regard. It's crucial, of course, that the NEC is allocated the necessary resources and that the government disperses the commitments that it's made for this fiscal year. Continued dialogue is going to be required among the government, the NEC, political parties, the Peace Building Office, and civil society to prevent electoral violence. There must not be any reversal of the gains made in consolidating peace in Liberia. Ireland is a proud partner of Liberia on gender equality and the WPS agenda. Our embassy in Monrovia has supported the NEC in the establishment of a gender unit, and we're currently supporting the Peace Building Office on the prevention of violence, in particular against female candidates and empowerment of women at local level. We've also established a partnership with the Liberia Elections Observation Network that will involve monitoring hate speech against women. As others have pointed out, women only account for 17% of all electoral candidates. So Ireland calls on all stakeholders to eliminate barriers preventing women from playing a more equal role in democratic processes, including civic and voter education targeted towards women voters, gender mobilization across the country, and efforts, as we've said, to protect female candidates from violence. Then on the regional dimension, as others have mentioned, 2020 is an important year for elections in West Africa, with presidential elections taking place in 6 ECOWAS countries this year, including 2 bordering Liberia. We know that Liberia is seeing an influx of refugees from Côte d'Ivoire, and that this risks, of course, increasing border tensions at an already challenging time for both countries. So we believe that engagement with international partners, particularly the Mana River Union and ECOWAS, should be used to address any such tensions. The 2020 elections offer valuable lessons which can be applied then to the presidential and legislative elections. And we believe that it's important that we learn from the experience and begin planning now for 3 years' time. Similarly, as we proposed during our meeting with the African Union PSC last month, a lessons learned exercise could perhaps usefully involve an examination of the role of the UN and the AU in transitioning contexts. These lessons can be applied to other countries in which peacekeeping missions are due to conclude and where peace building and PBF support will be required. So finally, in closing, I just want to reiterate Ireland's strong and continued support to the government and people of Liberia on their path towards sustainable peace and development. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Kelly, and thanks for your comments and for Ireland's commitment to gender equality and WPS, not only in Liberia but also elsewhere. Thank you so much. I'd now like to give the floor to the Deputy Permanent Representative of the Republic of Korea, Park Jul-ju, followed by the Deputy Permanent Representative of Canada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also thank all the briefers for the comprehensive briefings for today. Republic of Korea would like to thank you for convening today's timely meeting at such a critical political juncture with the coming elections in Liberia. My delegation would like to reaffirm our support for the PBC's continued efforts toward political stabilization in Liberia. In particular, I commend the PBF for making positive impact on the ground and call for continued investment in Liberian peacebuilding project. Against this backdrop, I would like to highlight the following 3 points. First, we need to look beyond the coming elections in early December in Liberia. Throughout the electoral process, we must not forget that the true success of peaceful election depends on what happens once the election is over. It is equally important to mitigate any potential tensions after the election. As such, I would like to ask a question to our briefers on what kind of plans they have for the post-election process at this stage. Secondly, the Republic of Korea joined others in calling for an inclusive peace process. While I recognize the Liberian government's efforts in empowering women, There is always room for improvement, I think, and we hope the government of Liberia continues its fight against gender-based violence to advance women's empowerment in peace process. Third and last, I think the public health and medical support are essential, especially to ensure free and safe voting during the pandemic. The Republic of Korea had contributed a grant of $2.7 million to Liberia for post-Ebola health capacity building initiatives. We hope that such support has provided Liberia a better foundation to respond to COVID-19, just as the allocate had stood in solidarity before. We stand ready to combat this new pandemic together. In conclusion, it is imperative that we support the election process to move peacefully so that we can realign our focus on national development and reconstruction of Liberia. The Republic of Korea would like to urge the PBC to continue its support to the Western Coordinator in Liberia in accordance with the principle of national ownership and priorities. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your attention.
Thank you so much, Park, for your comments and for your support, and also for pointing at the situation post elections. And I will refer that question back to the briefers who will come in after member states. Let me now give the floor to the Deputy Permanent Representative of Canada, Richard Arbeiter, will be followed by Japan. Richard, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you for convening us. Thank you, of course, to the briefers, particularly in the field, for being with us. If it's any consolation, I also had technical issues, so it's not just you. I had some moments where the sound skipped out, but happily they were few and far between. The real strength of this engagement, I think, is hearing from people in the field. So we thank you for your perseverance in continuing to engage with us. We really feel that the strength of the PBC is in collective continuous learning, right? And we have the benefit of hearing from a diversity of views in this exchange, and often unvarnished and sometimes critical views as well. So my questions, I won't repeat what a lot of folks have said, but my questions are really coming from that space. How can we collectively learn to do better? And so I have a couple questions in that regard. My first is on the gender issues. Now, I have to admit that in Canada, our numbers for women's political participation are not where we want them to be either. We don't have gender parity in our parliament. We have it in our cabinet, but not in our parliament. And we are trying to learn to do better. A lot of that goes into political party development and early recruiting. And so I'm interested in particular to the reactions, in the reactions to some of the results of the gender audit and the technical mission, and of the work that's gone, that you've heard here today. Sort of what would you do differently going forward on the basis of what we heard here today? And that question is not only to our friends, of course, in the government of Liberia, but it's also to our friends in PBSO. And here it's not because one project makes the difference in the world, but reading through a lot of the material here, the focus was very much on women's empowerment, on youth political engagement, socioeconomic empowerment, a 3-year program numbering over $25 million. This is the season of elections across the continent, a lot of areas where the PBF has been focused. So my question really to PBSO is, what should be repeated from what was achieved in Liberia over the past 3 years in those areas? What should be adjusted? What would you shift if you were to invest or design a project differently, whether it was in Liberia or in some other part of the world, on the basis of what you've learned from this experience? And where do you see the real potential for gains and impact from what it is that you did the last time? I think having that understanding, and it may not be readily available, right at this moment, but having that understanding allows us, again, collectively to do better next time. Not that it's ever going to be perfect, but I think builds a better knowledge base across the multiplicity of partners that engage both on Liberia, but across the countries that the PBF is supporting at the moment. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Richard, for those reflections and questions. And I now like to give the floor to Ambassador Hiroyuki Namasu from Japan, followed by the United Kingdom.
I thank Ambassador Nestrom of Sweden for convening today's meeting. I also thank His Excellency Mr. Kamaya, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Liberia, and all the briefers for clearly setting out challenges and opportunities facing Liberia. Today, I would like to discuss 3 points that Japan believes are essential for our efforts in the lead up to the elections and beyond. First, it is critical to alleviate the impact of the human security challenges exacerbated by COVID-19. This is necessary not only to ease human suffering, but also to address people's socioeconomic frustrations and grievances, which could translate into their political behavior and create instability to the detriment of the electoral process. In this context, this year, Japan has provided grant aid of around $3.18 million in total to address food insecurity and to support the health system in response to COVID-19 in Liberia. Secondly, no efforts should be spared to maximize positive engagement by all Liberians in the electoral process. Most importantly, the international community should send a clear message to the people of Liberia that it is a collective responsibility of all Liberians, not only the electoral bodies, but also the population, to make the elections as credible as possible. The international community should utilize all tools and avenues available to encourage and support a wide range of stakeholders, including the government, opposition leaders, media, and civil society, such as women and youth organizations, to play their part in creating an enabling environment for credible elections. Thirdly, looking beyond the elections, it'll be essential to facilitate social cohesion after a tense electoral process and to advance efforts to economic recovery and long-term sustainable and inclusive growth, all of which require efforts to build strong institutions and promote good governance. With those tasks ahead, the international community should keep showing solidarity with Liberia on its path to sustaining peace. We strongly believe that the PBC should continue to leverage its convening and bridging power to promote partnership between all stakeholders in support of Liberia. At TICAD 7 in Yokohama last year, Japan announced a new approach for peace and stability in Africa, or NAPSA, and expressed its commitment to ensure human security and support institution building in coordination with state and local authorities. Based on this initiative, Japan will continue to support Liberia in various areas in collaboration with the international community. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for your support and for your comments. I'd now like to give the floor to Stacey Blundell, Senior Policy Advisor from the United Kingdom. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thanks, colleagues. We're really grateful that the Liberian delegation could be with us today. I think we've had some really rich briefings. The UK is pleased to call Liberia a friend, and we're proud to be a trusted partner in the country's peace-building journey. We have a mission in Monrovia that's very engaged and a lot of development support on the ground. We also stand very firmly with the UN's peace-building role in support of the government, including, of course, through our engagement with US OSG Chambers and the Western Coordinator's Office, as well as our contribution to the PBF and direct investment in UN programming. Chair, I just want to make 3 brief points, all linked to the guiding questions in the concept note. Firstly, on the issue of priorities around elections, the UK underscores, as others have, the importance of a credible, fair and transparent process. The revised code of conduct is extremely welcome. And so like others, I think we want to urge the government to continue that constructive engagement with opposition and media and civil society. The reports of protests and strike actions that we've heard about, and the numbers of
refugees arriving from Côte d'Ivoire are concerning, as I think is the shortfall in the budget of the National Elections Commission. So I think this meeting provides an opportunity to think about how we can ramp up that engagement in the weeks ahead and try to reduce both the short-term and the long-term risks to social cohesion, and critically to ensure that the Commission has the resources it needs to meet its mandate. Secondly, on women's participation and WPS, I want to join others in welcoming the government's commitment to tackling sexual gender-based violence and violence against women in elections and politics. The update on progress implementing the roadmap and the protocol is really welcome. I should note our concern about some reports of recent deaths of government employees linked to audits, and the importance that we place there on full and transparent investigations. Listening to briefers, and others have mentioned this already as well, it feels now that in spite of considerable progress made in bringing women to the table in the public sphere since Liberia's transition, it really is time for a second concerted push, if you like, to ensure that this progress doesn't erode. Thirdly, with regard to international support, I just want to reiterate the UK's commitment to working with the government and all partners indeed in promoting democracy and stability and improving the lives of Liberians. The pro-poor agenda is a really critical component to reaching the most vulnerable bits of society, including, of course, those affected by the COVID pandemic. Several briefers also made reference to the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection, where we have a close partnership on cash transfers for economic protection. Ultimately, Liberia's economic development also depends on its ability to attract investment. And I think we're really keen to increase UK investment in Liberia, but to do so, by supporting efforts that can nurture a favourable business environment, and that includes efforts in support of transparency, efforts to combat corruption. So we're really pleased to hear updates of the work going on in that respect. Before concluding, Chair, I just want to note that we've also heard increasing calls from elements of Liberian civil society for a war and economic crimes court. So I wanted to ask the government whether there were particular plans in the works in that respect. So finally, yeah, to say really that reconciliation can be led only by the government and the people of Liberia. The PBC, of course, can support. I think we need to be really a key pillar of that support. So thank you very much again for the opportunity. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for your comments and for the support of the United Kingdom to Liberia. I understand that Ambassador Tunde Ajisomo, Special Representative of the President of the ECOWAS Commission to Liberia, wishes to take the floor. So with your and the consent of member states, I would like to give Ambassador Tunde Ajisomo the floor. Ambassador, you have the floor. Ambassador Tunde, are you with us? Okay. Okay, go ahead, Ambassador.
It will reach New
York. Okay, that's right. Okay. So is my voice reaching New York now? So the chair, distinguished members of the Peace Building Commission, For the sake of time, let me thank you for convening this important meeting. It really underscores the importance that the Peace Building Commission attaches to sustaining peace as well as facilitating development for Liberia. And you have been doing this in a very commendable manner. I also want to thank all the member states, for their contributions as well as the briefers, the foreign minister, for its briefing remarks, and His Excellency Dr. Mohamed Chambers, who has been giving us necessary support, and all the other briefers. The PBC, ECOWAS, really appreciates your support, and we are quite, very much aware of the good work that you are doing, and here we are doing our possible best, to support your efforts. Some of the issues that have been raised, which I would like to comment on, especially the level of supports that have been given, aim at, facilitating a transparent, free and fair election. I want to begin first with the support that we first received from Germany. The German ambassador in Liberia has done very wonderful job, gone back and forth, to Berlin, with a view to getting us support, for that technical team. And this is based on what the chair of the National Election Commission earlier said, that because of the multiplicity, of names in the register, which arose as a result of trucking, as a result of voters that were induced, and the need to ensure credibility, of the voters' roll at member states. Some of the member states did mention the reliability of the voters' roll is very cardinal, in determining, the credibility of the election. And this was done in 2017. The same team that we brought in 2017 are also the one on ground. And they arrived on the 22nd of October, and they've been working assiduously with the UNDP technical team. The support from the Germany is being implemented, by UNDP and the National Election Commission. And I want to seize this opportunity to also commend the data center of the National Election Commission, because they've actually commenced work on the cleaning of the voters' roll. But because it's huge, the arrival of the two technical teams, have really helped a lot. What have they done? They've carried out a thorough assessment of the problems. And what do they observe? They observe, duplications, and the duplications arose as a result of lack of biometric. I'm quite happy that my brother, Kingsley, I have been working closely in engaging stakeholders, highlighted this in his briefing. It's a major risk because Liberia has been using the OMR, we call it optic mark recognition, which is a limited biometric, because the only biometric you have in optic is the photographs. And the photographs, as you know, does not provide you with full physiology. The fingerprint, which is much more reliable, which enabled, continuous voter registration. It's the opportunity that we're looking forward to in the 2023. It is important we do this so that Liberia will be at par, with other member states. All the other member states are now using biometric, because it reduces flaws in voters' register. So we really thank the German government for the assistance they've provided. So they've identified three-pronged approach, in resolving these multiplication of names. And what is the three-pronged approach? The first one has to do with using the text, suspected duplicates. The text I mean now, the information on the UMR, they scan the UMR form, and they look at the similarities in terms of names, similarities in terms of age, similarities in terms of gender. Then the second approach is looking at the field report of the exhibition. Exhibition was just carried out. So the report that voters brought to the data center with respect to multiple names on the register. these are being removed. Then the third one is the use of facial recognition software technology, which is a cloud infrastructure. They are working closely with the UNDP and the data center. And the goal is between now and the 18th of November, when the FRR will be published, to remove as much as duplicated names on the voters register. It's not possible for them to remove all the names, as you know, because of what I said earlier. It's a limited biometric. But we want to ensure reliability. And that was why the first meeting they had was with the stakeholders, the political parties representatives. And they presented their action plan to them, and they were quite impressed. And they requested for their technicians, who are IT experts, who also came and observed the process with them. And they are now meeting with the party representative next week, Tuesday, to explain to them the progress that they have achieved, in the last 2 to 3 weeks. So this is with respect to the cleaning of the voters' roll. Now, the leader of the team, who happened to be a former chair of a Ghana Election Commission, Madam Charlotte Osei, will be arriving this weekend to support the chair and the commissioner in the areas of election planning, election management, logistic distribution, as well as electoral dispute resolution. Being a lawyer and having managed election in Ghana at the presidential level, ECOWAS felt that our presence will go a long way in instilling confidence in the electoral process. Having said this, Madam Chair, we want to thank the European Union for the support with respect to strengthening the electoral process in preventing violence, both before the election, during the election, and after the election. Now, this was done in collaboration with our office, the ECOWAS office in Addis Ababa. But this instrument is called African Union, European Union, ERM, Emergency Response Mechanism for conflict prevention. We're using preventive diplomacy, using our good offices, the offices of the UN, the offices of the ECOWAS, the international partners, engaging with all the relevant stakeholders. And as the EU representative mentioned, the focus is on capacitating civil societies, looking at civil society. It's a build-up to what ECOWAS did with other stakeholders in 2017. And the EU was so impressed that they asked us to extend the facilities to Sierra Leone in 2018. So we want to thank the EU for this support, and the ECOWAS office also in Addis Ababa, for this initiative. We're also concerned with the low women representation, and this ERM, because this is the ERM 3, ERM 1 and 2 took place in 2017 and 2018. So ERM 3 will focus also on women participation, and the focus will be, assisting the women, because there are very few. There are only 20 candidates, out of the 118 candidates. So we're looking at how do we help to prevent the women that will be participating from people not snatching their votes. So we want to have a dedicated poll watchers, for them. In some counties like Nimba County, we have 3 women that are vying for senatorial positions. In Morovia, in Monserrado, we have 2. So these poll watchers, their role will be dedicated. Make sure that women votes, sacrosanct are intact. Then also, the ECOWAS radio will also be made available, highlighting the priorities, in their campaigns, so that the public will get to know, what they plan, to offer. And of course, also, we are also going to work with other embassies, in monitoring the election. We like to use the word diplomatic watch. The EU representative put it so well, and the German ambassador also reminded me, for us in ECOWAS, we call it monitoring and observation, but diplomatic watch is quite necessary. We'll do it along with the ECOWAS missions and all the African missions and the other missions, to make sure that the international community in Liberia, take very active part, in this senatorial election. The senatorial election is very important because people will be wondering, why is it that we're focusing attention on only 15 candidates? If we don't ensure a credible senatorial election, if we don't ensure a free and fair election, it will affect the inauguration of the government in the inauguration of the parliament in January 2021. And therefore, it is critical to all the stakeholders that we want a full Senate, that will be inaugurated. And of course, also the referendum, is also critical. Liberians are very anxious, to see the tenures, of their leaders, the president, has started, by expressing strong desire to have his tenure reduced. And this is very commendable, Ditto also for that of the Senate, ditto also for that of the House of Representatives. So we are hoping that the Supreme Court will quickly, look into all the litigations and then lift, the temporary stay so that campaign can start. But I want to, appeal to our colleagues, to distinguished esteemed members of the PBC, to critically look into the funding gap of the National Election Commission, especially the areas that have been identified. Training of election officials, very key, to the success of the election. Payment also for election officials as well as poll watchers, including also creating public awareness, public awareness, for voters, to really know, what, the election really stands, for them. That election is a festival of democracy. It is not a do or die, if you don't win this time around, you have opportunity to win at the other period. I thank you, for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and thank you for addressing some of the questions and comments that were brought up from member states. I would now like to give our colleagues in Monrovia the opportunity to comment on the questions and comments from member states. I would appeal to you to be as brief as possible. We have about 30 minutes, but I would also like to let Oscar Taranco come in, as well as the Shashi of the Liberian mission in New York. So I will hand over to you, and I suggested we follow the same order as we did in the introduction, starting with the foreign minister and then the chairperson of the Election Commission, followed by SRSG Chambas, resident coordinator and election coordinating committee. And as I said, please be as brief as possible. And Foreign Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you. I would just like to deal with the issue of the War and Economic Crime Code, because most of the others are election related, and so the next chairperson can deal with that. But the concern from the UK. So thanks once again from that side and from our colleagues for their interventions and questions. As it relates to the War and Economic Crime Code, Liberia as a government, His Excellency the President and the government, we are very much keen on the need for justice. Even myself here as foreign minister, even if I had not been foreign minister. But the reality is, like I know all other countries, we have 3 branches of government, and there is coordination amongst us. We refer to that as even 3 equal branches of government. So this issue is not a new one. This is something that this administration inherited, and we won't go back to shifting blame and what have and what have you. But the president, even in his address, to the United Nations last year, to be precise, when I was there, was very much clear, loud and clear on this matter. As a government, the executive, through the president, did refer this issue to the legislature. And so at where we stand now as a government, the executive, the president cannot undercut that very endeavor. So the legislature has it before them. So any attempt further as it relates to this issue will undermine the endeavor, the initiative. So we leave it to the legislature, which is the people's representative. We refer to them as the people's representative, including myself as my representative. So what they come up with will then determine the next step as a government. And our understanding from up the hill, the legislature we've heard has been doing consultation with their respective constituencies. So we don't know what is coming out of them, and we cannot preempt, we cannot go ahead of them. So we are waiting to see what comes out. What will be the response from that which His Excellency the President has put before them as it relates to this matter, which is quite sensitive. It has security implications. So I am of the strongest conviction that the national legislature in its wisdom will take into consideration all of the implications that will bear on this matter and be able to come up with their response to what the president has put before them. At that time, when that is done and the response is made to the president, His Excellency, the president also, I'm confident in his wisdom, will then look at the response that has come from the legislature as it relates to war, economic crime code, and then he will know the next step to take. And at that point, we all can do. But anything other than that, at this point in time, will be premature. And I'm sure whether from the international community or from even our fellow Liberians, there is no one out of reasonability that will want to see the president or the government from the executive end to endeavor ahead of getting a response from what they've made. It's like you took a case to the court, and the court is deliberating, even though the legislature is not a court. And so while the court is deliberating the matter, you are then moving ahead to even pass judgment or come up rendering decision, which will not be acceptable. So we look forward to the legislature, and following that, the government we sure will have a position as it is. And I may not have the floor, so thanks again for what you've done. It's good seeing all of our colleagues again, and from Monrovia's side, it's also like homecoming for me, because the international partners at home are people that I've had relationship with before even going to New York. So I'm also happy that I'm back and serving them. And they've been very outstanding. My sister and friend Anna Karen back home here, your colleagues back home have been very outstanding too in terms of standing to Liberia. And that's one good thing that Liberia benefits from. I see the unity within the international community, the commonality as it relates to how we look at issues here. I say we because I see myself as from government. I also see myself from where I come from, the UN, as a part of the international community. So I always fight to strike that, to make sure that I have that kind of balance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Foreign Minister, and it's very good to see you too, even if you are very much at a distance in the small square of the Zoom. But very good to have you with us. Thank you so much. Can I now hand over to the chairperson of the National Election Commission, Madame Brown Lasana? A lot of questions on the elections, but also to you, I would appeal for being as brief as possible. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, you are aware that the presidential and legislative elections will be held in 2023. During that time, we will have new voter registration, and we will be proposing the use of biometric rather than the optical mark recognition or OMR form. In 2017, we made similar proposal, but at the time it appeared to be very costly, and the government at the time could not produce the kind of funding for us to have biometric. We also see it important to have timely funding of our electoral activities. And then the issue of addressing trucking during our processes, there is a law which outlines acts constituting malfeasance, which include trucking, attempting to influence the registration process. We can hope at this point for a coordinated approach to identifying trucking and truckers and enforcing the law to mitigate this menace. Finally, I want to say that the plan for post-election, especially if there is a crisis or as we normally go through many lawsuits, we continue to have our dispute resolution mechanism functioning and continued engagement with the candidates and their political parties, as well as continue to work with the government security apparatus, and in the hope that we will be able to address potential or real conflict and violence as a consequence of the electoral process. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your very good work, and we wish you all the best for the continuation of the preparations, and thanks for being so brief and to the point as well. I'd like to see whether SRSG Chambas would like to comment on any of the questions. Mr. Chambas, are you still with us? If not, I will ask the resident coordinator, Mr. Manning, if he would wish to take the floor briefly. Mr. Manning?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to make a brief comment on a question that has been raised, which I think is extremely difficult to address, but I'll attempt to see if I can throw some answers to this. What would we have done differently in order to not find ourselves in a situation where we don't have women in political situations? My answer basically is this. The first point is that I think the people of Liberia are increasingly getting impressed and getting to know what democracy is. It has not always been the case in the past in the history of them. And therefore, when we observe who they elect, it comes closely to the fact that they elect people they know and people they trust. Unfortunately, the political situation in the country is such that over the years, the people who they will know and the people who they will trust are concentrated in Monrovia, in Montserrat, because this is where the economy is. There has not been any decentralization, and therefore people who leave those areas who become known come here and don't go back, so the people won't vote for them. Unfortunately, we have a situation where there are very brilliant women, but they are Monrovia based. And therefore, if you take them to go to the countryside, unfortunately, they may not get the vote. So we need to address that. Now, over a longer period, over a longer term, I think probably what we need to do is, as I said earlier on, there must be more effort on education and sensitization, and the more emphasis in government policy towards making sure that the economy in the counties also grows, so that people in those areas who are known will become, people who they can vote into offices. But to start with, what I would propose is that generally all the people who've known as politicians here have held executive appointments and positions. So why not? Why shouldn't we advise the government to be appointing more young, vibrant, and active women into executive positions where they will be exposed? And from that basis, if they come from various parts of the countries, at least they stand a good chance of being backed by their own countries, and therefore get positions in also the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And finally, Mr. Blow, if you would like to address any of the questions posed by the member states, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a last few comments. So I know the focus is on the consolidation of democracy and peace in light of the 2020 senatorial elections. But just to bring to your attention to the audience that elections do not guarantee democracy, and that for us as civil society, we believe that democracy without addressing inequalities is meaningless, because we spend thousands, millions of dollars to vote, and the system doesn't address the inequalities that gave rise to the historical roots of the conflicts, and therefore making our post country vulnerable and fragile. And therefore is very important that we begin as a nation to place the priorities of our minimum resources not in the hands of 5% of the population, but that the resources will address inequalities across the country that will limit the country's vulnerability. And lastly, pre-elections, violence and intimidations, we've had the Minister of Justice set up committees to investigate those previous acts of violence. We've had no report of those who have been involved in those violent acts, and then to bring them to justice. Democracy with impunity undermines security. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Blow, for your important comments and for your commitments and engagement for the elections and beyond that. Thank you, and thanks to all other briefers for your comments. Before I ask Mr. Davis from the Chargé d'Affaires of Liberia to make his concluding remark, I would like to see if Oscar Taranco would like to say a few words. Oscar, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Anna Karen. Thank you, and to congratulate you and congratulate the government of Liberia and the many distinguished briefers. I thought that today was precisely the type of interactive and very engaged discussion that helps breathe life into the work of the Peace Building Commission. Many things happened today. Actually, it was not just discussion about the challenges of the ongoing upcoming elections in Liberia, postponed because of COVID-19, but the confluence of what it takes actually to run credible, free, fair, peaceful, and transparent elections. So I thought it was a good canvas of issues that were raised, many of which we're paying very, very close attention because, of course, PBSO, in the context of the Department of Political Affairs, will be working very closely with SRSG Chambas and the resident coordinator precisely to see what lessons we're taking from this process to factor them into the upcoming next electoral process. It's always very challenging to discuss all these issues a few weeks before an election takes place. So I get the sense of great anticipation, great, how can I say, frustration at the same time, because there's very little right now. I mean, this train has left the station, and clearly I think there was a very strong call for what is still required to meet the budgetary needs of this electoral process. The Peace Building Fund has been referred to in many occasions by almost all briefers and many member states. I think it's extremely important to state that precisely the fund has been investing in how to empower and to bring women and young people into the political process. This has been a top priority, not just for this election, but all the previous elections that have been referred to. And as we speak, I mean, I think, and to the questions that have been raised, a lot of the joint programs that we are helping the UN agencies, but also civil society organizations from Liberia to work in a coherent manner in support of processes that bring transitional justice, reconciliation, and the aspect of peaceful elections to the center. One such program is precisely supporting the Women's Situation Room. This has been one issue, this has been one particular extremely good lesson learned in the context of Liberian elections in terms of prevention, in terms of inclusion, in terms of empowerment. And so looking forward, and we are right now looking forward to see how we strengthen civil society and, of course, national institutions for the 2023, I believe, upcoming elections. Important actually to state how important the support to the Independent National Commission for Human Rights is in this context. It wasn't mentioned, but it is a complementary support mechanism. Equally, the second phase of the Liberia National Action Plan for Women, Peace and Security, because this is what has allowed us to actually address many of the problems that have been referred to. And equally important has been the focus on cross-border initiatives. Many of you, and I think this is also a moment in the context of what SRSG Chambers was referring in the sub-region. This is a moment where Liberia is receiving displaced people from other countries. You know, just not too long ago, it was the reverse situation. So I think it does speak to a certain consolidation, to a certain stabilization that is happening. That focus on cross-border investments is precisely to ensure that many of the past sort of triggers of violence is also being addressed. You know, I have many more things to say. I know time is running short, but just let me add that we are fully committed to working on the lessons learned. There was that particular reference from Canada. My colleagues were sending me tremendous amount of lessons learned from the many evaluations that have happened to feed into the peace building architecture review. And certainly maybe we can share them with everybody that participated here today in terms of what is driving our strategic focus and programming and how we're trying to do this in a manner that actually builds from the challenges that we will be focused on as relates to this particular election. So again, thank you for the opportunity to come back and congratulate everybody for this really meaningful participation. Thanks.
Many thanks to you, Oscar, and to your colleagues. And I think it's a very good idea that you mentioned with the sharing the lessons learned. I think this is something always it's good to stand on that basis as we look forward on how we can improve our processes. So I think that's a very good idea that we can come back to. Thank you. So thank you all very much for your contributions. And I now like to hand over the floor to Israel Davis, Chargé d'Affaires at the Mission of Liberia to the United Nations in New York. Israel, you have the floor. And you are muted.
Okay. Hello.
Yes, go ahead. Yes,
Okay.
Go ahead. We hear you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair. With honor, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Liberia, His Excellency Mr. D. Maxwell Sakemiya Sr. I thank him for his usual splendid contribution to a forum of such. I also would like to recognize the presence of His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Ibn Chambers, Honorable Devietta Brown-Lassanan, Dr. Kingsley Opoku Amani, and Mr. Oscar Blow for their excellent, elaborate briefings and for providing clear insight on electoral matters. The presence and contribution of Ambassador Achisomo of ECOWAS and ASG Oscar Taranko have added immense value to this meeting. We are certainly pleased with the salient interventions from representatives here at the UN. This demonstrates your strong solidarity with Liberia during this critical period. I am quite sure this meeting wouldn't have happened
at a more appropriate time than now, especially that in few days, Liberians will be participating in parliamentary elections and constitutional referendum on December 8th. I'm not surprised this meeting has engendered brilliant perspectives. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, elections do have consequences. That is why we share the view that acquiring appropriate resources to conduct the election is fundamental. We cannot fail on this. For the democracy and tranquility we continue to savor will largely hinge on the fruitful outcome of this process. You are all aware of the remarkable advances we have made regarding elections, and the peaceful conduct of this one will also further demonstrate the strengthening of our democracy and peace. Liberia's commitment to the advancement and consolidation of its democracy and peace remain uncompromising, and we count on your continued support for a peaceful, inclusive, and successful electoral process. To this end, we encourage the United Nations to continue its efforts to assist Liberia and work in close concert with ECOWAS, particularly during this significant period. We hail the illustrious efforts of the Elections Commission and express gratitude to the United Nations, ECOWAS, and all our friends for not giving up on Liberia. I trust that we will make you proud as we have done in the past. Nonetheless, as evidenced from the briefing of Honorable Lassana, there is still a funding gap for which we solicit the continued support of the United Nations, the international community, and Friends of Liberia. These are among the many reasons financing for peace building remains an essential initiative to support. Furthermore, the Liberian President, Dr. George Manawia, recently affirmed that it has been quite a difficult time for Liberia, making reference to the recent wave of mysterious killings and the rise in rape cases, the stress on the economy, and our continued fight against COVID-19. Yet, he remains hopeful that these challenges will be transcended with the resolve of the Liberian people and the assistance from partners. Moreover, as expounded by Minister Kemia, we are pleased that President Weah has taken steps to address these concerns. In closing, Madam Chair, let me express on behalf of the government of Liberia our deepest gratitude to the Peace Building Support Office, working in close collaboration with the Peace Building Commission and by extension, the Peace Building Fund. These institutions remain dependable pillars as asserted by Minister Kemia. They accompany us through our rocket paths, and to present, they are still by our side. They ensure that Liberia's peace-building priorities are kept on the right trajectory, and their work helps to inspire hope for our young and thriving democracy. And with the current development in the region, the Peace-Building Fund support to a second phase of cross-border cooperation with Côte d'Ivoire, focusing on social cohesion and security across and around the border is just timely. We also could not be more grateful to you, Ambassador Enestrom, in your capacity as chair of the Liberia configuration of the Peace Building Commission for your personal interest in sustaining the thrust in supporting Liberia's peace building endeavors. Finally, I join others in expressing our deepest condolences to Ghana and Mali for the demise of the former presidents. I thank you very much for this opportunity again.
Thank you so much, Israel, and I can assure you that I and the configuration of Liberia and the Peace Building Commission will not give up on Liberia. We will stand on your side and by your side. So we will continue to cooperate here in New York and in Monrovia. Can I just, in wrapping up, because we have to close in a couple of minutes, express my sincere gratitude to everyone for what I totally agree with what Oscar said. This has been a very active, it's been a rich, and it has been a substantive discussion. I think these past 3 hours have been really time very well spent. And it's very nice to see Foreign Minister and my good friend Kemaya in Monrovia, and we thank everyone in Monrovia for your active participation, and also to colleagues and others here in New York. We have heard many important updates on the work being carried out in order to create a conducive environment for the elections. But I think at the same time, we all agree that there are many challenges ahead. And I just want to highlight a few takeaways from this discussion. The upcoming elections are an important part in the continued path to sustain peace in Liberia. The risk of tensions related to election should not be overlooked, and we have heard of that today. And all parties, government, opposition, civil society, international partners, media, and others should work towards ensuring that these elections can be conducted in an orderly, inclusive, and transparent manner. And we have also heard about the funding gap for the elections, which is a serious matter to attend to. Secondly, there is a need to continue to support civil society-led observer networks and allow them to participate in strengthening the democracy. To this end, and as we heard from Ireland, the Embassy of Sweden in Monrovia is supporting the peace-building office situated within the Ministry of Internal Affairs and other partners in the Situation Room on COVID-19 related issues and the upcoming election. This work carried out at the national and local level emphasizes the importance of advocacy work led by civil society, as well as early warning mechanisms to prevent escalation of conflict. And thirdly, the efforts of ensuring that women can actively participate in this election must continue. Important work is being carried out by the civil society organization Liberia Observation Network Lyon, and this was also referred to by our Irish colleague, which has conducted several large surveys, including on election reform, voter registration, and violence against women in election and politics. I commend the efforts by the government of Liberia, the UN country team, and all other partners working towards this end. I also urge the government to continue to work with the roadmap addressing the alarming report of sexual and gender-based violence. The socioeconomic impact will most likely be far-reaching in Liberia, as in many other places. Going forward, the PBC Liberia configuration looks forward to continued engagement with partners such as the World Bank, the IMF, in order to stay updated on the current situation and the challenges posed to the country's continued path to sustainable peace and development. And with that, I would like again to take all colleagues that participated in this meeting, not least those of you that took your time in Monrovia. I would like to extend my deepest appreciation to Oscar and his PBSO colleagues here in New York, including Chelsea and Paolo, for all their continued hard work in making sure that this PBC meeting can take place. And of course, I also would like to thank my own colleagues at the mission, Matilda and Christian, for their invaluable support. And this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you so much, and I wish you all a good afternoon, evening, and a good weekend. Thank you, and goodbye.
Goodbye.